They say the worst betrayals don't come from enemies. Enemies stab you in the front. Family, they sharpen the blade, smile at you, and drive it into your back while whispering, "It's for your own good." Before I continue the story, kindly like this story, subscribe and tell us where you're listening from. My name doesn't matter, not yet. What matters is that I trusted the wrong people with my life. And when I say life, I mean that literally. Let me take you back to the day I decided to fall asleep. Not the normal kind of sleep, no. This was calculated. Planned. Some people call it insane, I call it necessary. I had been living with suspicion for years, suspicion that the woman who wore my ring, the one who swore eternal love, only loved the empire I built. Every smile she gave me felt just a little too measured. Every word of comfort just a little too polished. And the family she came from? Wolves. Wolves dressed in velvet. So, I struck a deal with a certain doctor. An ambitious man with enough discretion and enough greed to keep his mouth shut. My condition was simple: put me under, make it look natural, and keep me alive long enough to see what the people closest to me would do if I couldn't defend myself. That's how I ended up in the hospital bed, wires and tubes everywhere, breathing steady but unresponsive. To the world, I was in a coma. To me, it was the stage of my greatest experiment. Now, you're probably thinking, what if they passed the test? What if they proved their loyalty? Believe me, I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to wake up, laugh at my paranoia, and confess it all as a stupid stunt. But the truth doesn't care about what you want. The truth showed itself faster than I ever expected. Day one, they were there. My wife, her brother, her mother, faces wet with tears, voices trembling. A picture-perfect family in mourning. I might have believed it, if not for what came after. Because when you lie in a coma, people forget you're still there. They think you're deaf. Blind. Gone. But I was none of those things. I heard everything. And on that first night, when they thought no one was listening, I heard her. My wife. The woman I once believed I'd grow old with. She leaned close to the doctor, voice barely a whisper, but to me it roared like thunder. We can't wait forever. You understand what I'm saying? We need it done. Quietly. If he lingers, people will ask questions. We need the inheritance to transfer. Soon. The doctor hesitated. Her brother chimed in, "Don't worry, we'll take care of you. Just, end it. End it." That's what they called it. Ending me, like I was nothing more than an obstacle. A lock standing between them and a vault of gold. I would be lying if I said I didn't feel something break inside me. But grief wasn't it. No, grief is for those surprised by loss. What I felt was confirmation. Cold. Clean. Like a surgeon's blade. So I lay there, still as stone, as they whispered about dividing everything I had worked for. My wife claimed the house. Her brother wanted the company shares. Her mother demanded jewelry and land. And the doctor? He'd be rewarded too, for his assistance. But as they carved up my empire, they didn't realize they were cutting their own throats. Because here's what they didn't know, I wasn't going to leave them a single coin. Not a penny. Every morning before work, I used to drive past a crumbling building on the edge of the city. A poor home. The kind most people pretend not to see, peeling paint, cracked windows, children with hollow eyes but radiant smiles. They waved at me, every day. Little hands lifted in hope, even when they had no reason to hope. And every day, I told myself, one day I'll do something for them. Now I knew exactly what that something would be. I was going to give them everything. Imagine it. My greedy wife and her conniving family sitting in silk chairs, sipping champagne, waiting for the lawyer to read the will, and then discovering they've inherited nothing. That all their crocodile tears, their whispers, their plotting, had bought them only humiliation. That thought kept me alive in that bed. That thought became my oxygen. But make no mistake, I wasn't ready to die. Not yet. I wanted them to feel my eyes on them, even if they thought they were rid of me. I wanted them to sense, deep in their bones, that the man they had betrayed wasn't as powerless as they believed. So I listened. 4 days. 4 weeks. I listened to their whispers grow bolder, their patience wear thin. Each word they spoke carved another tally mark in my mind, another reason they would regret underestimating me. And as I lay there, silent, I made a promise to myself, and to the children in that poor home. If they want me dead so badly, I'll give them a death. But not the one they're expecting. Mine will be the kind of death that drags the guilty down with it. And that, my friends, was the moment the test ended, and the revenge began. Do you know what it's like to be trapped inside your own body? To hear every sound, feel every touch, but not move a single muscle. It's a prison unlike any other. No bars. No guards. Just silence, and your own thoughts echoing in the dark. That's where I lived for weeks. The hospital room was my cell, and every word spoken around me was a visitor I could not answer. The doctors thought I was unconscious. My wife and her family prayed for my recovery in front of strangers, then whispered for my death when the room emptied. And me? I just listened. At first, I tried to cling to memories. I remembered mornings when life was simpler, before the money, before the empire, before the wolves came knocking. I remembered my father's rough hands, his warning that wealth could turn even blood into poison. I had laughed then. I wasn't laughing now. I thought of the poor home too. Every morning, without fail, I passed it on the way to the office. A cracked building sagging under years of neglect, but alive inside with children who carried more hope in their broken shoes than my wife's family carried in all their silk clothes. I remembered one boy in particular, maybe 10 years old. Skinny, barefoot, always at the gate. He used to wave at me like I was a king. And I, in my air-conditioned car, would nod back like it was nothing. But lying in that bed, I realized it wasn't nothing. That boy's wave was the only genuine thing I had seen in years. That wave became my anchor. Meanwhile, my wife grew impatient. Her visits became shorter. Her whispers sharper. I heard her one night, arguing with her mother when they thought the nurses had left. What if he doesn't die? What if he actually wakes up, she hissed. Her mother's reply was ice cold, then we make sure he doesn't. One slip of the machine, one missed dose of medicine. No one will ask questions. He's already half gone. And I lay there, listening to my death being planned like a business deal. Here's the thing most people don't understand, when you know the people closest to you want you dead, fear stops being your strongest emotion. Hatred takes over. Hatred sharpens you, keeps you awake even when your body begs for rest. Hatred gives you purpose. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. Instead, I started planning. First, I had to survive long enough to wake up. That meant trusting the doctor only so far. He was corrupt, yes, but greed is a funny thing. It makes people predictable. I knew he wouldn't risk killing me unless the price was high enough, and my wife, cheap as she was, wouldn't hand over too much too soon. That bought me time. Second, I needed proof. Proof of what I heard. Proof of what they were. So, whenever the nurse came to check my vitals, I forced my eyelids to twitch, just barely. It was risky, but I needed someone, anyone, to suspect I was aware. If the right person believed me, they could become my witness later. Third, I had to channel my anger into patience. And let me tell you, patience is a blade sharper than steel. Every whispered conversation, every greedy plan, I stored it like ammunition. There was one night, though, when my patience almost cracked. Her brother came in drunk. I smelled the alcohol before I even heard his footsteps. He leaned close, his breath sour, his words slurred but venomous. You think you're smart, old man? You think this company is yours forever? When you're gone, I'll burn your name out of it. No one will even remember you built it. He laughed, a hollow, ugly laugh. Then he spat, actually spat, on my motionless hand. I wanted to kill him right there. To rise up, tear the tubes from my body, and strangle the life out of him. But I didn't. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't about rage. It's about control. So, I waited. And as I waited, I made a silent vow. When the world finally heard my voice again, it would not tremble. It would thunder. The irony was delicious. They thought I was powerless, but in truth, I had never been more dangerous. Because they had revealed themselves. The masks were gone. The wolves had bared their teeth, and I had seen everything. One night, as rain lashed against the hospital windows, I whispered inside my head the words that became my mantra. They think they're waiting for me to die. But I am waiting for them to fall. And fall, they would. The poor home would rise, children would laugh in a palace built from their greed, and the very family that plotted my death would choke on the ashes of their expectations. All I needed now, was the moment. The perfect moment to wake. And when that moment came, I swore, I would not rise as the man they once knew. I would rise as their reckoning. They didn't expect me to wake up. For weeks, they stood over me with crocodile tears and whispered poison, believing the man in the bed was deaf, dumb, and doomed. But the human body has its own sense of timing, and mine chose the perfect moment. It happened just before dawn. The hospital was quiet, the kind of quiet where every machine beep sounds like a gunshot. I felt it first in my fingertips, a tingling, faint but insistent. Then my chest rose deeper, my throat coughed, and suddenly, I was back. I opened my eyes. The nurse nearly screamed when she saw me blinking. I couldn't speak yet, my voice was a ragged growl, but the look in her eyes told me everything. I wasn't supposed to return. By the time the sun came up, my wife and her family had been summoned. They rushed in, faces twisted into masks of joy, hugging each other as though the heavens themselves had blessed them. "Darling, you're back," she sobbed, clutching my hand. Her tears dripped onto the sheets, warm and salty. But her grip? Cold. Calculating. I looked into her eyes and pretended not to remember. That was my weapon, feigned ignorance. I croaked, voice dry as sandpaper, what happened?" "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her hand stroking my forehead. "You collapsed. We thought we lost you." She was good, I'll give her that. A performance worthy of an actress. But behind her rehearsed sorrow, I saw the flicker of something else, panic. Because deep down, she knew that sometimes, people remember more than they should. I let her stew in that uncertainty. The next few days were a dance. I played the fragile patient, relearning to walk, to sit, to breathe without machines. They hovered around me, smiling too wide, speaking too sweetly. And every time they left the room, I caught their whispers outside the door. "If he remembers anything. Don't be paranoid. He looks weak as a kitten. Still, what if? Fear is a beautiful thing. It makes liars stumble, makes killers hesitate." I wanted them afraid. Afraid that the man in the bed might know their darkest secret. But survival was only my first step. Revenge required precision. So, while they were busy pretending to be my caretakers, I was busy plotting. My first move was contacting someone I trusted more than my own blood, my lawyer. I couldn't risk the hospital phone, too easy to monitor. Instead, I waited until the nurse, the same one who had seen me stir, came in for her evening check. Her name was Clara. She had kind eyes, the kind that didn't fit the sterile cruelty of that hospital. When she leaned close to adjust my I whispered, "Help me." She froze. Then slowly nodded. I told her I needed to speak to my lawyer in private. No one else could know. And God bless her, she arranged it, a late-night visit disguised as a routine medical consultation. That night, when my lawyer stepped into the room, his face pale but sharp behind his glasses, I wasted no time. My voice was still weak, but my words carried steel. "Change it all," I rasped. Every asset. Every share. Every stone of my house. Transfer it to the poor home by the river. Not a penny for her. Not a penny for any of them. He blinked, startled. Are you certain? That's everything. Yes, I said. They wanted me dead for my fortune. Let them choke on the sight of it feeding children instead. He hesitated, then leaned forward, his tone low. If they discover this before it's finalized, they'll. They won't, I cut him off. Not if you do your job. Discretion is survival. And you will be rewarded, when the time comes. He nodded, understanding. Papers were signed. Seals were placed. My empire was no longer mine, it belonged to the forgotten. But revenge isn't just about taking something away. It's about exposure. About pulling off the masks so the whole world can see the monsters hiding beneath. So, I planted bait. I began to ask questions in front of them, feigning confusion. Was I sick for long? Did the doctors say what caused it? I watched their eyes dart. I asked about the machines. Funny thing, sometimes I think I heard voices. Their smiles faltered. Every word I spoke was a knife sliding between their ribs, because they didn't know how much I truly remembered. One evening, as my wife sat by my bed reading a magazine, I whispered, "You cried for me, didn't you?" She looked up, startled. "Of course, darling. Every day." I smiled, weak but deliberate. "I thought I heard it, your voice, whispering." Her hand froze on the page. For a second, just a second, her mask slipped. And in that flicker of fear, I knew she was mine. I was no longer the man in the coma. I was the ghost haunting their guilty minds. Still, I needed one final assurance, evidence. Words can be denied, memories dismissed. But recordings? They cut deeper than knives. So, with Clara's help, a small recorder was hidden in my drawer. The next time they whispered, their voices would belong to me. The net was tightening, the stage being set. And as I lay back against the pillows, the machines beeping steady beside me, I thought of the boy at the poor home, waving through the rusted gate. Soon, his world would change forever. And theirs would collapse. The awakening wasn't just my return to life. It was the beginning of theirs unraveling. Because now I wasn't just alive. I was listening. I was watching. And soon, I would strike. Do you know the beauty of a mask? It only works as long as no one dares to rip it off. And by the time I reached the 4th week of my recovery, my wife's mask was hanging by a single thread. Her smiles were thinner, her patience shorter. The whispers outside my room grew more urgent, more venomous. They had expected me to die quietly in that bed, but instead, I was sitting up, asking questions, even cracking jokes to the nurses. I was supposed to be their victim. Instead, I had become their problem. The recorder I'd hidden with Clara's help was filling with gold. Every night, the wolves gathered at my bedside, believing I was asleep. And every night, their greed spilled out. Why hasn't he signed over power of attorney yet? Don't push him too fast, he'll get suspicious. Suspicious? He's already suspicious. You saw the way he looked at me yesterday. Hours of this. Enough to bury them 10 times over. But evidence is only half the battle. You need timing. You need spectacle. You need to show the world what monsters look like when the lights come on. So I waited, biding my time, letting them think they still had a chance. Then I made the call, the quiet call to my lawyer, instructing him to prepare a gathering. A simple family meeting, he told them. Just to discuss estate matters. They came dressed like royalty. My wife in pearls, her mother in diamonds, her brother in an imported suit. They thought it was the beginning of their victory lap. They didn't know it was their funeral. The lawyer sat at the head of the table in the hospital's private conference room. I wheeled in slowly, still pale, still weak-looking. Let them underestimate me one last time. The room hushed. "Thank you all for coming," the lawyer began. "Your husband, your brother-in-law, your son-in-law has some important matters to address." All eyes turned to me. My wife gave me that well-practiced look of concern. "Darling, you should be resting." I raised a hand. My voice was calm, but every syllable cut like glass. "Rest can wait. I've been resting long enough." I looked at each of them in turn. The mother, smug. The brother, impatient. My wife, pretending devotion. And then I said it. While I lay in that coma, I heard everything. The silence was perfect. For one glorious second, their faces were masks of shock. Then came the scrambling. "What are you talking about?" my wife snapped, too fast, too defensive. Her brother laughed nervously. "You were unconscious. You're confused." Confused. That word lit a fire in my chest. I leaned forward, my gaze fixed on them. No. I was listening. Every whisper. Every word you said to the doctor. Every plan you made to hurry my death. Her mother scoffed, but her hand trembled against the pearls at her throat. "Delirium. You're not well." That was when I pressed play. From the small recorder in my pocket, their own voices filled the room. Grainy but unmistakable. "We can't wait forever. You understand what I'm saying? We need it done. Quietly. Don't worry, we'll take care of you. Just, end it." Their words, their betrayal, echoing back at them like ghosts. The color drained from their faces. My wife's lips moved soundlessly, searching for an excuse that didn't exist. Her brother swore under his breath. The mother whispered a prayer. And I just smiled. "You wanted me dead," I said softly, "so you could feast on what I built. You came into my hospital room and divided my empire like vultures circling a corpse. But there's one thing you never considered." I let the pause hang in the air, thick enough to choke them. "That empire isn't yours to take." I nodded to the lawyer. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Effective immediately, he announced, "Every asset, every account, every share belonging to my client has been legally and irrevocably transferred to the Riverstone Poor Home." The explosion was instant. "What?" my wife shrieked. "This is fraud," her brother roared, slamming a fist on the table. Her mother clutched her pearls, eyes wild. "You can't just give it all away." "Oh, but I can," I said, my voice steel now. And I did. "Every coin that would have lined your greedy pockets will now feed the children you drive past without a second glance. Every brick of my house, every chair in my office, every diamond you thought you'd wear, belongs to them." I leaned back in my chair, savoring the silence that followed. "You plotted my death for an inheritance you'll never see. You buried your humanity for a fortune that isn't yours. And now, you will live with nothing but the memory of what you could have had." Her brother lunged across the table, face red with fury. Security stepped in before he could reach me. My wife just stared, her mouth opening and closing like a drowning woman. And then I gave them my final gift. The knife they would twist in themselves forever. "You should know something," I said quietly. "When I first lay in that bed, I wasn't certain. I suspected. I feared. But I wanted to believe in you, at least a little. I wanted to wake up and find my doubts were lies. But you proved me right. You proved who you really are. And that truth. That's the only inheritance you've earned." I left them there, broken, screaming, choking on their own greed. And as the door closed behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. Because revenge isn't about killing. It's about making sure they live with the knowledge that they lost everything, not to chance, not to fate, but to the very man they thought was powerless. The mask was gone. And the wolves, stripped bare, were nothing but scavengers gnawing on air. Revenge is never loudest in the moment of the strike. It's in the silence that follows. The silence where your enemies realize it's over, where they finally understand that everything they reached for has turned to ash. That silence is music, sweeter than any symphony. And I have been listening to that music ever since the day the mask fell. The papers were signed, the transfers sealed. My empire no longer belonged to me, nor to the wolves who prowled around my bed. It belonged to the forgotten. To the children behind the rusted gates of the Riverstone poor home. You should have seen it. The first time I visited after the transfer, the building barely stood upright. Windows cracked, the roof leaking, paint flaking off in sheets. But the children didn't care. They gathered at the gate like always, waving at me with those same hopeful hands. Except this time, I didn't just nod back. I walked through. When the director of the home realized what I'd done, her knees buckled. She cried so hard she could barely thank me. But I didn't need thanks. Watching those children eat hot meals that weren't scraps, seeing them sleep in beds that didn't sag with springs, that was my reward. Every brick I'd laid in my company, every sleepless night I'd spent building my empire, finally had a purpose. Not to fatten the greedy, but to lift the innocent. And as the home grew, as new walls rose and new classrooms opened, news of it spread. Reporters came, cameras flashed, stories aired on television. The headlines burned my wife and her family more than fire ever could. Business tycoon leaves entire fortune to children's home. Betrayed by blood, saved by strangers. They couldn't hide. Their names weren't in the will. Their faces weren't in the news. They were ghosts now, ghosts of greed, erased from the empire they thought they owned. I sometimes imagine them, sitting in their darkened mansion, the pearls pawned, the diamonds sold, the champagne gone flat. Fighting each other for scraps while the world celebrates the man they tried to bury. But the sweetest irony? Fate has a cruel sense of humor. One rainy evening, months after the dust had settled, I was leaving the poor home after a late visit. The children had begged me to stay for supper, and I had, rice, stew, laughter. My heart was full. And then I saw her. My wife. Standing at the gate where the children used to wave. Her hair was a mess, her coat thin against the rain. She looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes sunken, her lips cracked. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. But no. It was her, the woman who once plotted my death for gold, now standing outside the very place she once dismissed as worthless. When our eyes met, she lowered hers. She didn't beg. She didn't speak. She just stood there, rain dripping from her chin, watching the children inside as though she were the one locked out. And maybe she was. Because when one of the boys, the same boy who had always waved at me, ran up and tugged my sleeve, asking, "Who is that lady?" I smiled and said, "No one you need to know." Then I walked past her without another word. That was the moment I knew my revenge was complete. Not because I ruined her wealth. Not because I exposed her betrayal. But because I denied her the one thing she could never steal, redemption. She had traded her humanity for riches and ended up with nothing. Nothing but the ghost of what she could have been. Me. I had peace. You see, people think revenge is about anger. About striking back harder than you were struck. But the truth is, revenge is about balance. It's about restoring the scales when the world tips too far into darkness. They wanted me dead. Instead, I lived. They wanted my fortune. Instead, the children got it. They wanted their names remembered. Instead, they were erased. Balance. Now I spend my days where I belong. Not in boardrooms or behind steel towers, but here, among the forgotten who no longer need to be forgotten. Their laughter is my profit. Their future is my legacy. And every time I pass through the gates of the Riverstone home, I see that boy waving, smiling with a full stomach and clean clothes, and I think, This is what it was all for. So when people ask me, was it worth it? Losing everything, just to deny your family their inheritance? I laugh. Because I didn't lose anything. I won everything that mattered. And as for them? Well, if you ever drive down the other end of the city, you might see them. Once proud wolves, now reduced to scavengers, clinging to shadows. Me? I don't stop. I don't look back. Because the past is buried, the betrayal avenged, and the final act complete. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Betrayal may wound you. It may even bury you. But if you rise, and rise wisely, your enemies won't just lose the war. They'll lose themselves. And that, my friends, is how I turned betrayal into justice. But I want to know what you think. Was I right to leave everything to the poor, or should I have taken my revenge another way? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, I'll be reading them. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more stories just like this one, and share it with someone who loves a good twist of revenge. Until next time, stay sharp, because you never know who's whispering behind your back.